Hello and welcome to the first part in this new 40k cosplay series. In this video I'll be covering how I made a plasma gun from Warhammer 40k Darktide. And not just the regular plasma gun either, this is the Chaos version. This is the one that you see wielded by the Karnak Twins and various versions of the Scab Captains. This fancy gun comes with a very cool red coil, a modified barrel cover, a digital readout for your ammo supply, and a very cool bayonet. Or at least I think it's a bayonet. But anyway, without too much rambling, let's dive into it. First things first, I needed to make a template for this. There are pre-existing templates out there online already for these guns, but I noticed when doing some comparisons that the plasma gun in Darktide is a little different. So I had to do this myself. Using some screenshots I took from the weapons viewer, I traced everything out to scale and made a printable PDF template, which is free on my website. Side note, if you are going to use this template, scale your print down to 80%. I don't know how or why it happened, but all of my weapon templates in this project got upscaled. I made my template in a few layers to make the assembly process a lot easier. This way I have templates for the inner core structure as well as the outer layers. Alright, so first thing we're going to talk about is my template process. If you've ever done any prop weapons before or thought about doing prop weapons, you've probably seen these before, where somebody had made a complete side profile of a gun and you more or less just trace it out and use that as your reference for making your weapon. So what I had done, because I couldn't find anything that matched the plasma guns in this game, I had to make my own. Reason being I couldn't find any close to what I needed was because there's a slight artistic difference between the plasma guns in Darktide versus everything else, basically. Short explanation, this entire part here is normally up higher, and there's like a series of rivets. Looks like when they designed these for the game, they took those coils the whole way down, halfway down the gun. Nothing major, but it just meant that it changes the entire aesthetic of the gun, which means I need to make my own templates, which is good because then it means I can share them. So the way I did this, I went into the game. Since unfortunately Darktide doesn't have any kind of model viewer, there are a couple ways to kind of go about this. And in terms of weapons, you can go to the cosmetic section or something like that. Or if you already have the gun, you can inspect it. So I did that with the plasma guns. I got a side view for both the left and right, front, back, and then I screenshotted all that. I then imported that into Adobe Flash, the old version of Flash, not Animate, because I refuse to ever give Adobe money anymore. But Flash is a vector-based program. This is great because that means making these traces is insanely easy. I can just draw a line, change the angle of it and everything, contort it to whatever I need. I don't need to constantly actually trace anything, just connect the dots, make the lines, adjust the curves, trace it that way. So I did that for both sides, and usually at that point that's about how most gun and weapon templates go, and that's it. And then on the user end, you would then take these and you would cut out whatever you need to work out your layers and figure everything out. But that's a little hard to do, and there's a lot of detail in this stuff. So I figure to make it a little easier on me, and then when I go to share these later on, if they turn out okay, I can then share them with you. So what I did in this case, I have my left and my right. No major changes on these from left to right, aside from a couple extra wires here. I think, yeah, this part here and a little extra wire there. This knob here, this little knobby thingy on the side. I don't know if it's like to crank something, but it won't be functional. But what I am recording this entire bit for, to explain, is I decided to break this whole thing up in Flash while I was doing the tracing. So I'd traced the whole thing initially, made a second frame, went to do my next trace, but instead I just started removing things, and I kind of broke it into layers as it went. So we have like our first layer, our second layer, and our final layer. You still need to do the same thing as you usually would do beforehand, or before this kind of template, where you still need to cut things out and kind of get ideas of how things should be layered, but this helps. So what this will do is, I had this very first one. This is your most basic shape. This is your, I guess you could say, your core of the whole gun. So this entire part here, where the coil is, that's going to be completely empty and hollow, because the way I want to do it, I want to make the whole coil section hollow so I can throw LEDs in there so it lights up. And then, of course, if you look in the second one, that then runs along straight through the barrel, which means that I can then have LEDs coming out of there. Well, not LEDs, but light. So we have our first layer, which is your core. And in this one here has your core with various extra bits on it. In this case, some of the side plating, extra hand grips for the handle, the little front handle, which is like your shotgun cocking piece, which I don't think is functional in this because there's nowhere for it to move. And some extra stuff like that. And then you would then have your final piece, which is for all of your extra additionals. This is more just for visual reference, but it mainly involves the barrel cover and your little energy cylinders that you have, and then all the little doodads. But yeah, a quick little explanation of how this template works. Now we've got to cross our fingers and hope that it works for us. There's one more thing I should probably also mention too. While this is based on the player model of the plasma gun, it is not exactly 100% accurate when it comes to the Scab Captains plasma gun. So I'm going to have to do some artistic changes to get that to fit. Actually, the only major changes are right on the end. So it looks like, from what I can tell here, that the barrel cover seems to be either broken off or cut short on the top half. And then on the side of the shield, there's a line set down the center, and it's split with a giant circle. Now that's not on these. And then you got nice little chaos arrows drawn around it, which is pretty cool. And then last but not least, the one thing I like about it the most is it's got a nice old bayonet blade on the end. It's all broken up and you can tell it's been used. So the entire bottom half doesn't seem to have these vents that you would normally see around your barrel cover. So I'll be filling these all in and only having the top off to put in that divider line. Looks like maybe these guard plates are not going to be there as well. It also kind of looks like his grip goes out the entire way. Unless I start counting coils and get an idea, there's going to be some changes basically. Nothing major. I think it's going to be too much of a problem for me, obviously, but it's something I will have to keep in mind when I get past the second layer and I start working on the third, when it comes to the final details, which in this case would be the shroud for the barrels. But I'm already well aware of it now, so when the time comes, I'll be very well aware of what all I need to do. Probably have to make a couple notes and do some sketches, get an idea to make sure what I need to do to make those changes. For the core, I started out with 2 layers of 10mm EVA foam. I cut out channels inside of them for several wooden dowels. Anywhere that looked like it might need a little extra strength, it got a dowel. These were then secured in those channels with hot glue. And the sheets were laminated with contact cement. Before I started adding any layers, I had to figure out where my battery was going to go. If I were to light up the coils in the gun, I was going to need to be able to turn it on and off and power it. My plan was to create a channel in the back where I could later remove the rear power cell and slide in my USB battery. And with that marked and cut out, I went back to making the gun by working my way outward in layers. This was mostly another round of 10mm foam, 1 layer on both sides,
followed by yet another layer again, currently putting us at 6 layers of 10mm foam. You can see now that the channel for the coils are beginning to take shape, but before I can get anywhere near that, I had to do some cleanup because my layers didn't line up perfectly. While doing this, I also made my barrels for the gun as well and attached them to the front. The coils were a bit of a pain in the butt to do. I tried several times, each one not giving me exactly what I wanted or just failing outright altogether. My first attempt was something that I saw a fellow 40k cosplayer do a while back with clear shower curtain rings. I lined them up, glued them together, and started working on ideas on how to both keep it sturdy, but also diffuse and disperse the light from inside. But after spending way too much time working with this idea, I realized that because of the change in the design in this gun in Darktide, these coils are now longer than your normal plasma gun's coils, meaning that they can't be round, they need to be oval. I'll let my past self explain.
Okay, so right now the base of the plasma gun here is moving along pretty good. Spent most of last night trying to work on ideas for the coil in this thing. My first idea was round shower curtains, or shower curtain rings. I thought this was going to be a good idea. I've seen other people do it with plasma pistols. And then I realized, see if I can get this in here. It was way too short. Not only does it need to go up about maybe a quarter to a half inch, but also I don't like the fact that it then wraps down inward. It needs to be more oval shape. It needs to come down and then go straight. So this idea was no good. I had another idea of trying to use some clear hose and kind of wrap up something. I didn't have everything that I really needed to do that, so I kind of set that idea aside. Next idea I had was 3D printing. It was like an 18-hour print. The file that I found was only it's a couple inches short, so in terms of counting coils, I think I needed like an extra 5 out of like, I think 14 that's on this. Set it up, went to bed, woke up, it's going along pretty good. Went out skating, hit an adult session, had some fun, came home, print failed. I've never seen this happen before, but somehow my filament got tangled up inside of the roll. Or probably like, I probably only had about this much more to go. It was so close. I only had like maybe 2 more hours left in it. So I have another one printing in the background right now, and in the meantime, I'm going to attempt this option with the hose. We'll see what works. That's probably going to be my goal for tonight. So, long story short, the second 3D print also failed. This time, due to a power supply issue. I won't go into detail because it's not that important. I'll just say that my 3D printer is kind of a piece of junk. Fortunately, I was kind of expecting this to happen, which is why while it was printing, I had started my next idea for the coils, which was cutting a series of tubes. This was a little tricky. First, I had to make a dummy mold to get an idea of the shape and bend that they needed to be, using some random foam. But with that made, I had an idea of how long I needed each tube to be. These were just clear PVC tubes from Home Depot. They come in pre-cut rolls. And with them all cut to length, I needed to glue them all together. To do this, I used a bunch of tape, both inside and out, and then I went to town on the inside with hot glue until I got the entire inside.
This not only helps with holding it all together, but also helps to kind of diffuse the lighting a little bit as well. And you can't even make out the hot glue from the outside, which is pretty cool. And to further diffuse the light, I used a layer of transparent foam on the inside. And with that all figured out, I needed to start working on the LEDs. I wanted to cram in as much in there as possible to get it as bright as possible. My first attempt at this was with some cheap $4 Walmart LEDs, and that was a mistake. So I went back to the store and got something a little more expensive with a lot more success. And with a little trimming and bending, I was able to squeeze the LEDs into a shape that would fit inside of the coils. I had a little channel dug out in the bottom of the corners for the ends of the coils to sit in. I filled those spots up with some E6000 and pressed the ends of the coils into those two slots. And to make sure it stayed while the glue was drying, I wrapped the gun in painter's tape. E6000 takes about 24 to 48 hours to fully dry, and I had to work the next few days anyway, so I let it sit for the next couple days before removing the tape.
Alright, so since this isn't really a scripted thing, I don't know what I actually said last time. So I had tried printing the coils in this gun and the print failed. I tried it again and it failed again. This time for completely different reasons. So I had one other backup plan that I had mentioned I was going to try, and that was with some clear tubes, PVC tubes, I believe. I can't remember what kind it was. Anyway, that turned out pretty good. I'm very happy with the way these turned out. It's insanely uniform. I was not expecting that, which is why I was kind of hesitant to do it at first, but they are actually fairly uniform. And I swapped out the LEDs that I had the last time. Oh, I should probably grab my little remote, keep them just straight red, because the last pair of LEDs I got were like cheap $4 LEDs from Walmart, and they were terrible. So I bumped my budget up a little bit and bought like some $15 LEDs. Oh, I actually do still have a chunk of it because I did have to trim it a little bit. But they are these kind. If you've probably seen them around before. Only really this part here actually lights up, and the rest of this doesn't. But this lights up insanely bright. So what I did was I more or less just folded it a couple times and then folded around the other way. That way I had a lot of light going this way, a lot of light going that way, and a little bit on top, enough for it to give a nice even shine. And the end result turns out pretty decent. There are a few small inconsistencies, like right there and right there, but overall it's very evenly illuminated, and that is 100 times better than what I had before. Battery source for this is going to be this, unless I can find something smaller, which this should be fine, is this little USB lipstick battery thing. I used these on my Black Templar to run the fans in the helmet. I had this in a little pouch in the back. But anyway, the way this is going to work then is that this is going to slide in the whole way in the back here. Hopefully. Yeah, just like that. There's going to be like a fake like canister thing here after everything's built. So I'll have kind of like a fake rim around here for that canister, pop the lid off, and I'll be able to access this, pull it out, plug it in. So that'll be good. But with all that done, kind of the base internal structure is now done. So up next, we'll be sanding before the detailing.
Up next was sanding. I've shown my little makeshift sanding booth in the past. It's not perfect, but it catches the bulk of all the dust. I needed to sand this as smooth as possible because the layers of foam cut were not 100% uniform, and everything will be attached to this. So not only did I need a smooth surface for it all to grab, but with what little will still be seen and exposed afterwards, this will be the last time I'll be able to reach it easily without accidentally sanding something else. I also made sure to bevel any edges needed, and I got the battery hole as well, opening it up on the inside as much as I could to give the battery as much room as it needed to fit. Up next was the detailing phase. I started by making little trim pieces for both the front and back of the coils. This was not just decorative, but it also helped to stop any light from escaping out from any gaps in the front and back. And from there, I started cutting out the individual detail pieces from my template and transferring them to foam. These were all varying thicknesses, mostly whatever I felt worked best for those spots. For this process, I kept my Dremel and my blades ready on hand for any small detailings needed. I also made sure to sand the edges clean on every piece before gluing them onto the gun. So from here, I started working on the detailing on the lower portion of the gun. This is the mounting block for the power cell on the bottom. This was 2 layers of 10mm on both sides. Later on, I'll be hollowing this part out to fit in some LEDs. With those attached on the side, I used some 5mm foam and made an extra piece in the back of the gun. There's supposed to be a trimming around the mount for the energy canister, so I cut it to shape, sanded it flush to the edges, and cut out the trim on the inside. Up next was the handle at the base of the gun. Since this wraps around the underside, I needed the core to be round when it does this, and right now the base of the gun was squared. So I trimmed a 45-degree cut using one of the 10mm layers as my guide, and then sanded it semi-around for a better fit. Since I had mentioned that the front portion of this gun was different from the player version in-game, I had to do some modifications from this point forward on the gun. The handle was going to be longer, which meant I couldn't use the template to figure out the notches for the grip. Instead, I got out my ruler and started figuring out the spacing and placement for those notches myself. Once I had them drawn out, the grip was going to be 2 laminated 5mm pieces. Once I cut out the recessed bits on the outer layer, I left them in and laid my glue everywhere but the cut section. This helps keep everything in the first layer stay in its proper place for gluing. And once the 2 pieces were glued together, I'd remove the cut sections.
All right, so before we start for the day, just hit the weekend for me, so I finally get to work again. Just kind of give a quick wrap up of where I'm at right now. So right now I've already gone past the first 2 set of templates. First one was basic structure, built the coils up, and then I ran through the second template, which I have already cut up some. In the basic normal version of this plasma gun, there's this little extra knobby here right before the handle.
in this version that the Scab Captain has, this isn't there. The handle seems to go out farther, and then the barrel cover seems to be shimmed back just a little bit. So I just kind of cheated, brought this handle out about flush with here, and then that's where I'm going to have the barrel cover. Hopefully I didn't mess that up, and the barrel cover is supposed to go all the way back here. But in terms of length and coil counts, it's the same number of coils as it is for the player count. So I'm assuming that the barrel's still going to start the same spot. It just looks like part of it is shortened in the front, which I'll have to figure out after I start doing some more detail. As for what's next, so I have 2 of these full templates, one for the left, one for the right. That way I can trace these things out individually and figure them all out. This is what we'll be doing next. I think I'll probably save this and this for last, because they don't, I'm not gonna say they don't matter, it's just that they're not attached to anything, so I don't need to use them as reference for anything. I'll probably do all of these details first, which mostly is just going to be these little doodads here, all this stuff. And then I'll probably try and tackle this all on its own, because I'm going to have to completely redesign this since it's different on the Scab Captains version. Or the Karnak Twins, or basically all the Chaos guys that use this gun. It seems to be, well, I don't know so much about the lower level enemies. I don't know if any of them use a plasma gun or not, but as far as the big bads, like the Karnak Twins, Scab Captain, they have a slightly different version, so that I will have to figure out. On the left side of the gun is a green indicator light that I can only assume is an energy ammo readout. I needed something small, clear, and cylindrical. I could have just made a small piece of plastic or something, but when I was looking at it, the first thing that came to mind was the little glass pieces you see in a level. And the cool thing is, you can buy those on their own. And one quick Walmart trip later, I got my hands on one. I did have to cut off the excess plastic from the housing to make it fit in the gun a little bit better, and that's where my Dremel came in. Once I was trimmed down, I knew I was going to need an LED for inside to light this up. I went through my basket of LEDs that I've built up over the years. Most of this stuff is from the Halloween section. Every year, if I see something interesting, I'll grab it for later. In this case, these green finger lights. This did mean, though, that I needed to cut out another section to store this light, which is fine because there's another canister at the bottom of the gun, too. Another great access point for some lights. Just like the one on top, I'll make the lid for this one removable as well. But first, I needed to dig out the cavity for the LED. With that cut out, I also cut out an opening for the level and made a tiny bit of trim for that as well. And with everything glued in place, I can show off how the finger light can light up the level to make it look like an energy readout from the plasma gun. Looks pretty good. Up next was the barrel cover. Just like I did with the handle on the bottom, I rounded the corners on the base construction so that the cover would wrap more smoothly. Getting the shape of this cover right took a ton of trial and error, and I wasted a lot of foam trying to get it just right. In the end though, it was 2 layers of 5mm foam, inner layer being solid, and the outer layer having the vents. The first layer was laid down first, around the barrel, and this detailed second layer would be laid on afterwards. This allowed me to refine the second layer without having to lose everything. I also glued the outer layer trim in place before gluing everything onto the barrel. It was easier to do it this way because I could just trace the edges of the foam when making this trim. If I were to do it after laying the second layer down, the foam would already be warped and stretched, and it'd be harder to line up the trim, in theory. I also started working on the bayonet of this gun. This was 3 layers of 5mm foam with popsicle sticks and wooden dowels inside the center layer for rigidity. And with those 3 layers glued together, I carved and sanded down the edge of the blade. This wasn't super clean and smooth, which was good because this bayonet was meant to look crude and worn. Once that was done, I carved out a channel in the bottom of the barrel cover and filled it with contact cement. Put on the bottom second layer, and then slid the bayonet into that recess, with a little help from some hot glue. And from there, to finish things off in the front, I made all the little bits like fake rivets for the barrel cover and fake mounting hardware for the blade and other random little details. For the knobs above the handle, I cut out a bunch of circles in various sizes, rounded them off, glued them together, and started carving and dremeling out the details. The right side was flat, while the left hand had what I could only assume is a little hand crank knob. And with those attached, I started making the details on the block on the bottom. These are just small circles, cut and sanded into little bolt heads. I used my Dremel on the side to make a circular indentation and glued the little bolts onto the block. On the left side of the gun, there are some small wires that run along in various spots. I could have just used some real wires, but I did it all with foam so I could get the exact gauge and bends that I wanted with these wires. Dowels don't come this small, so instead I just cut thin strips and used my Dremel to smooth the corners. And the end result looks pretty good. For the sight on top, I used 2 layers of 5mm foam with popsicle sticks inside to hold it straight. And for the spikes on the sight, I cut out several squares from 10mm foam and carved them into little pyramids. And with a little bit of contact cement, I pressed them on top of the barrel sight. And from here, the only thing left to really do was to make up the little power cells. The top and bottom had slightly different designs to them, so I couldn't just assembly line this whole process. This was more trial and error, cutting out long strips and guessing the circumference needed, carving and drilling out all the little details, and making all the little doodads on the caps. And then with the caps all done, I needed a way to make them stay put. My original thought was magnets, but my experience with magnets have never been good, and I don't want to risk losing them on a convention floor. So I opted for Velcro. Lots of Velcro. High strength Velcro. I also added some bits to the inside of the caps too, so that they can only fit on the gun one way. That way they're always facing the right direction with all their little bits and doodads in the right position. And there we have it. A completed Chaos Plasma Gun. I'm gonna turn this light off real quick because it's a little blinding and hard to see. Fish this out. There we go. Okay. Obviously, this still needs sealed, primed, and painted, but right now it's 30 degrees outside, and the convention this is for, along with the rest of the costume and everything else, isn't until the middle of summer. So I have a lot of time to wait until I can actually go outside and prime all this stuff proper. I don't really have any kind of booth down here to do that kind of stuff, so I don't want to make a mess. So if you do want to see it painted, you're probably going to have to stick around until the end of the series, which will probably be after the convention. So this is going to be another long one. It's going to span a couple months, just like the last year's with the Black Templars. If you haven't seen that, check that one out in the meantime. It gives you something to watch. It's like 17 episodes. But in the meantime, I have a ton of work to do. So this is our gun. I don't know if there's anything else and extra and special I can show off. With the lights out, you can kind of see everything a little better, some of the details. Yeah. Caps all come off like that. Battery goes inside. Same down here. Cap comes off. Total held with Velcro. I'm perfectly fine with stuff like these spikes here not being perfectly uniform. A lot of the stuff that you see in this armor set, especially for the Scab Captain, is going to be very rough looking because it's how it's supposed to be intentionally. So that's cool. But anyway, I'm rambling again like I always do, so I will stop and I'm going to get back to work. See you guys in the next one. Oh, I don't have a light this time. Dang.